G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle, and today we're going to do a review on the Creality Halot-one Plus. This is a printer that, first and foremost, was sent to me by Creality. I didn't pay for this printer. This is the first time on the channel this has happened. This is actually a basically paid review. That said, you'll always, as always on this channel, get the honest review on the item. And first things first, I like it a lot. There are things that I would like to see tweaked or improved, but that's pretty much across all printers and not specific to this one, so not a problem from that end. This is an interesting one for me because I really like the product, but of course I don't want to come across as a shill. But we're going to go through and we're going to talk about why this particular printer, because it's the elephant in the room. What is the niche of this printer? It's not a huge printer, it's not a small printer, because you've got units like the Halot-one, which I previously did 10 months ago an unboxing on and a review, which is one I paid for, bought out of my own pocket, and I've had a lot of success with. There are other printers I've used, such as, Anycubic Mono X, or the Photon Mono, or I had an original Anycubic Photon, the old school one with the hinged top and steel sides. There, of course, is the Elegoo, the Mars, and the Saturn. I have a Saturn S, which is even bigger than this one. So it's an interesting situation to find myself in because this printer is smaller physically than this printer or this printer, and it's physically the same size as this printer, and this printer, and yet it does so much more. So small printers, for example, think the Halot-one or Anycubic Photon, they're mostly 2K resolution. Mid-sized units like the Elegoo Saturn or the Anycubic Photon Mono X, they're usually 4K. Now, don't get confused because there are such things as 8K and 4K in smaller size printers. There are 4K smaller printers. I mean, the Anycubic M3, Elegoo Mars 3, they're all 4K resolution. And the Elegoo Saturn 2 that's about to come out is an 8K resolution, larger format printer. But what about the Halot-one Plus? Well, this is a smaller printer, but as you can see, it's a 4K printer. And it's competing really with the smaller size printers. So let's not confuse it with the larger printers, because it's not one. Let's talk about build plate size, because that's very important. So the build plate, by the way, when we refer to it, that's this piece of aluminium you see above the screen that the model is actually pulled into and out of the resin vat with. That build plate size there determines how big a model you can create. Obviously, the Z-axis travel, the height of the screw, is one parameter, but the main two are the X and Y, which is that build plate. And on the smaller machines, it's around 127mm by 80mm, which is 10,160 square millimeters. On the Halot-one Plus, it's 172mm by 102mm, and that doesn't seem that much bigger, but it actually clocks in at 17,544 square millimeters, which is 75% larger surface area without the overall machine being any bigger. That is really cool. The larger mid-size format printers, let's take the Anycubic Photon Mono X here, okay? This printer, this is 192mm by 120mm in size, or 23,000 square millimeters in surface area. But it's also taller, it's bigger in every single dimension, and it does allow you to make larger prints in the Z-axis because of the height. But it only goes to 23,000 square millimeters despite being 2.3 times the size of the Halot-one. And while that seems like a really cool trade-off, when you compare it to the Halot-one Plus, it's only about 30% larger. That's incredible, because the Halot-one and the Halot-one Plus are the same size externally, physically. But the Photon Mono X, 2.5 times bigger than one, only 1 and a bit times bigger than the other. That's interesting. It's significant because size, well, it matters, especially in this instance. You see, the Halot-one Plus being externally the size of a Halot-one, and I mean, lovely little printer that it is, it's a lot more ergonomic. It's slightly slimmer at the top end, stylish blue cover. It's offering a package with 75% more build volume in the same size printer. That means that models that previously are unable to fit into the Halot-one, they'll fit into the printer, and when we do some slicing, I'll try and show that off. What that means is you're getting versatility and better bang for your buck if you're going to go for a smaller printer. Because in the perfect world, you're going to go for the bigger printer because it's bigger, it could be cheaper, whatever it might be, but not everyone has the room for a bigger printer. The printer is also twice the resolution of the Halot-one, and I've been using the Halot-one for 10 months, and it's been fantastic. So to have the same thing but incrementally better, I'm down with that. Size also matters when you compare it to larger printers, because my Creality CR6, Elegoo Saturn S, they're both fantastic machines. Both are 4K. The Saturn S has a giant print bed for a machine that size. Both machines, however, are pretty large. The Saturn S is the smaller of them, and it is 279mm by 240mm by 430mm. Whilst the Halot-one Plus is 236 by 243 by 418, and that's a lot of meaningless numbers for people, so let's just put it into volume, into litres. Because everyone knows what a litre is. 28 litres, or 7.61 US gallons, is the Elegoo Saturn. But 23 litres, or just 6.3 gallons, is the Halot-one Plus, so it's 80% of the size of the larger unit. To me, therefore, that's the true utility of the printer, to have a unit which is small, as physically small externally as any other entry-level unit. It can print items close in size to the mid-size units. It has 4K high-resolution screen, which is great, which is also becoming, let's be honest, the normal in small format printers going forward. 2K printers are going to be a thing of the past. 1080p printers are long dead. Dual linear rails, of course, gives you great accuracy. It has a touchscreen, Wi-Fi. You can send files to it remotely, and if you're using the proprietary software Creality Cloud, you can actually utilize other people's previously coded and sliced files to print. That's a lot of great features. But the thing that I want to talk about is, well, I like it a lot. I can print just about any of the miniatures I'd want to on the unit, and as you'll see in the upcoming footage, I'm sure, I'll demonstrate just how big the size difference actually is in comparison to the old Halot-one. And on that note, I want to say a word on that printer. The Halot-one was my first monochrome printer. My printer before that was an original anti-cubic photon, and that little Halot-one produced half of my Project Cronenberg army. I've clocked up some 2,700 hours on it of printing time, and the only faults I've had were down to resin or user error. I've replaced 2 sets of FEP film on it, and the third is probably due soon. That little printer has been a workhorse, and 10 months on from the unboxing and test print I did on it, I'm glad to say how well it has performed, because I'll say something reviewers never say. You're afraid to buy these things. I know I am. Nobody wants to go out and buy expensive items off the cuff because you just don't know they're going to work. It's why you come to us reviewers. You want to know if it's safe, if it feels like a gamble buying these items, such as these printers. You'll always, hear the horror stories. Day one, I opened up the printer and it was broken, or I tried to contact customer service for months and they just ignored me every time. That has been the polar opposite of my experience with the Halot-one. And despite having 2 larger printers with high resolution, I keep coming back to the little guy. I could read you off all the technical specs on it, but why? You can read a brochure for yourselves. What you want to know is, will this work? Well, its little brother set a very high bar, and how have I found the Halot-one Plus? So far, fantastic. Hasn't missed a beat. I've done several prints on it. I'll show you 2 of them in this video, in the interest of time, but I think it's going to be as good as the Halot-one original was. And like I said, 2,700 hours, 3 FEP films in 10 months. That's just a beast of a little unit. So, again, just to reiterate, guys, I think the big selling point of this unit is the fact that it is the same size, physically, externally, as those smaller printers, but you can print so much bigger items in it because of the larger print bed. That is what you would buy this for. if you have the space and you can afford it, then you could go and buy something bigger. You could move up to like, say, a Halot-Light CL89. It's a bigger printer. Or if you've got a fair bit of money, Halot-Sky. You hear great things about both of those. Haven't tried either of them. So keep that in the back of your mind. Anyway, let's go from here to slicing. Okay, so when it comes to slicing, we're going to use the Halot-one slicing software that came with my original Halot-one, the Halot box. It's also supplied with the Halot-one Plus. Now, this is their proprietary slicing software that comes with them. There are, of course, many other slicers like Lychee, Chitu-box, that sort of thing. Now, perfectly fine to use those. I use them myself. But we're going to use this particular slicer here because this is what's supplied. Therefore, we're going to assume that the people who are watching this review, this could be their first 3D printer. And so what they're picking it up with and what programs they're going to run to trial it out and test it and dip their toes in the water is going to be this slicing software. So we're going to use it. Is it the best? No, but it's actually surprisingly adequate. I like it a lot more than any cubic slicer for what that's worth. So this is the Halot-one build plate right here, not the Halot-one Plus, which is the printer we want to use. So what I'll do is I'll put on a miniature. In this case, we're picking a Space Marine, and it's a console of a sort in Mark II power armor. So cool mini and all. And you can see how much of the bed he takes up. If I was to put his arm, his body, and his other arm down, it pretty much takes up the width of one quadrant. And about half of the sideways width. So we're going to change the printer though to our Halot-one Plus. And have a look at the difference now in size. Now remember, this is a printer that is the same scale as, essentially the same scale physically on the external surfaces as the old Halot-one is, and yet look how much more space we have. We can build this Marine sideways across the platform and he's only taking up barely half. So yeah, go us. Now we want to obviously lay this out to print. So we simply have dragged our files in. Just click and drag a file and put it in the position you like. Then what we're going to do is we're going to look at these files and we want to support them in some way. Now if I support this Space Marine as he stands, every little part of him that's all bright red is going to get a support, and that includes a lot of the front of the miniature, including under the chin, under the jaw, under the face, under the eyes. I don't want to be doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the miniature to prevent me from having to do that. So I go back into layout. I select our rotate tool. Now we can either type degrees in the box, or we can simply click on the plane and rotate it by using these large ring dials. So we'll rotate him back slightly towards the rear. This means that almost all of the supports that occur on the miniature, well, they're going to be rear based. And we want that because the backpack's going to hide a lot of the crimes, and the front of the miniature is where we naturally will look at them. Therefore, we want to keep the front nice and clean and pristine as much as possible. There will always be these extenuating circumstances. And we're then going to also take this bolt pistol arm here, and we're going to do something similar. We're going to rotate it around so that it sits like this, because when we print it, obviously, the underside is the part you'll see the least. You're going to see the front, you're going to see this very side of it, and you'll see the rear. So we support it from underneath. I'm pretty happy with those and their positioning on the board, so we're going to support it now. So out of your support options on the right, you have the height from platform, 6mm. So that's how high this model's feet have been lifted up from the base platform. 6mm is pretty standard. The density, 50, fine. Tip diameter, 0.5mm. I go down to 0.3, 0.25 depending what I'm doing. And support diameter, 1.2, very standard. You could do the entire miniature being platform, you could do bottom only, there's lots of ways you can do it. But all we're going to do is automatically generate by clicking all. And what it's going to do is put in all of this for us. Now, there are things that do concern me, and one I know from experience is nacelles. So right up here at the top of this miniature is the nacelle. You can see where I'm hovering around at the moment. that there is prone to delamination. It just is. It sucks, but that's the way it goes, unfortunately. So I reckon what will happen is when we go to print this, it's going to give us grief. But I'm willing to go with the proprietary software and just see how good a job with these settings it does. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll slice the model. So slicing is essentially converting it from this format into a single file that can be read by the printer. In our slicing, we get to choose things like our exposure settings, our layer thickness. I like 0.03 millimeters, so 0.03 of a millimeter. That to me is the perfect middle ground. 0.05 is your default, and 0.01 is your super high-end high accuracy. But the 0.01 will make the miniature 3 times longer to print than 0.03, and frankly, the human eye struggles to see hundredths of a millimeter of difference. So 0.03 is the happy medium for printing a marine. That's the same level of accuracy that I printed the entirety of Project Cronenberg in, for example. The exposure time of 40 seconds is for the base, so the yellow platform that the marine is standing on there, that's how long that's going to be exposed for. And a 2.4 second exposure time is going to be for the rest of the model, so everything above that first 2 layers. Now, those exposure times, 2.4 seconds, that's a very general, okay, let's use that setting. That's one I like because I've found it working quite well in the past. You can go less, you can go more. Unfortunately, it depends on the resin on the day. So you kind of have to calibrate based on the material you're working with. And that's one of those funny things. We go for what we know, and I know 2.4 works on 95% of things I've done, therefore I default to about that. The rising height of 6mm is how far out away from the actual print screen the model will rise in between each layer. Now the motor speed of 1mm a second is very slow, but we'll start out with that just to see how slow it is. The turn off delay, of course, is how long after we turn off, and the bottom exposure layer in this case is 2, so it's going to do 2 of those 40-second long initial exposures, and then it's going to revert to the 2.4 second ones after that. So all I have to do from this point on is hit slice if I'm happy with my settings, and it will build up layer by layer through the couple of hundred layers that will be involved in creating this miniature until we have a finalized file. So it's going through that whole process, well, as I talk. Yes, it's a little bit boring, but hey guys, it's only about 10 seconds of your life. You'll get it back, I'm sure. Almost to the end now, it's just that long antenna to go. There we go, and just like that, we've got all the way to the end. And we can export the file now to generating file or directly to the printer if I wanted to use the Wi-Fi capabilities of the printer and send it directly there. And once you've of course done this, you've done that exposure, you can also go through and actually check out layer by layer as you print the miniature, which is really cool, especially if you're printing holo. You get to see inside the miniatures. So quite basic there, really. Now, another thing we're going to do is, obviously I'm going to put this onto the USB, but I just want to show you the size difference in what the 2 print beds are capable of when it comes to something like a base, because one of the things that is coolest to print in a 3D printer is bases for our miniatures, because there's so many STL files out there of bases, and well, resin bases are very expensive if you go and buy them yourself these days. Some of the best base makers like Secret Weapon Miniatures, they're gone now. And not everyone just wants to slap dirt or crackle paint down on their bases. Some people want bases that tell a theme. So we're going to pick out demonic base like the ones I used on Project Cronenberg, and we'll show those ones off. And we'll go back to our Halot-one. Again, Halot-one, standard sort of size in the industry for a printer. And we're going to put a 100mm round base on, and all of a sudden we run into a problem. It's too big. Well, okay, it says it's too big, but maybe there's a way around this. Maybe we can find that angle. We can just rotate this thing too. So let's rotate it around. It's pre-supported, and you know we can get a little bit more out of this. Jesus, right on the edge on the back here. The sides are good, but we're just overhanging thanks to the detail on top of the base, all these spikes. They're just sticking out of the base, and That's no good. What if we put it, though, on the Halot-one Plus? Okay, it's still too big, but hang on a minute. Rotate this bad boy around, and we're in with room to spare. I can put it up to one end, and not only can I print it on the printer, but I've got space that I can print something else. Like, I don't know, let's try, what about a 60mm base? Could I fit that on there as well? I could. Could I fit a second 60mm base on there? I could fit an oval base on. And none of these are interfering with one another. It doesn't matter that the build plate of the supports are touching one another there. That won't matter a bit where these two surfaces meet. I can print not only the biggest base, but I can print all three of these bases at the same time if I so chose. That speeds up print time and build time significantly. Well, anyway, enough of that. Let's go chuck this on a printer and actually do some printing, because that's what people are really interested in. So as you come up to the Halot-one Plus here, you switch on the power at the rear of the unit. The moment the machine starts up, it'll go to sort of the loading screen as you would expect from any electronic device. Now, this here I'm showing off, by the way. This is my printing table. These are a cheap, like, wine rack type thing you can buy from Kmart. I put every one of my printers onto them because I can store my resins in the wine racks and store all my tools in the drawers. I can wheel them around the place. Very handy. Just thought I'd point that out because people have asked me before. So, when you're looking at the actual unit itself, you actually go in and you can modify, obviously, the settings. And the first thing I like to look at is I like to update my print settings. Now, the big update to do is, in this case, I'm doing a wireless firmware update. Pretty easy, really. It tells you what the version is that you've got, what the current version is. Always update to the first one, because I often find whenever I pick up any 3D printer from any company, it's out of date. And although you can do it off the USB, you can download it onto the USB stick, plug it into the printer, the fact that this is wireless has made it very, very easy. So we're going to move on from here. This here is obviously the build plate. Now, when you're doing the build plate, when you want to do the actual leveling of it, you need to undo all 4 screws so that they move very freely. Very freely is the key there, because screws can get caught up or hung up. Now, with that in mind, you want to then put the build plate back onto the printer, making sure, of course, that the print head, the part that's holding the build plate, is well and truly up and above, away from the screen itself. So I put it on there, I make sure everything is nice and tight and rigid in the head, but the actual plate is able to move still. Then we want to go into our print settings. We want to go into our Z-axis movement, and we want to go back to 0 and do leveling. So back to 0 on its own would just send the print head up, but leveling is going to send the print head up to the top of the printer and then all the way back down, so that we can actually start the printing process, or printing leveling process. So now as the print head comes back down, what it will do is it will press firmly up against the screen. Now, normally they advise you to do this without the VAT in place. I like to do it with the VAT in place, and I've never had an issue with it by doing so. So what I'm going to do here is press down on the build plate nice and firmly and tighten the screws in diagonal corners. Now, it doesn't matter which one you start with, as long as you move from one corner to another, rather than doing up both the screws on one side, because it'll load up that one side with all of the pressure, and you don't really want that. Now, obviously, this is a little bit of a slow process here. Because of the VAT being in the way, I'm unable to use the quick end of the Allen key, so I have to use the short end, basically, of the Allen key, which has got excellent leverage, but is very slow. So forgive me, but this is the time it takes to do a full leveling process, and you get to watch my hand for the whole lot of it. So quite a bit to do up here. And I say that jokingly because it's really not. It's 4 screws and it takes about 40 seconds or so by the time you've actually gone in there. So we're already up to screw number 3 of the 4. And we're just tensioning that one up. As you can see, there are spring washers underneath those screw heads, very important because these spring washers will help resist the vibrational forces inside the printer. The printers are they're not moving a lot, but they have some movement, and the more movement there is, the more likelihood that a screw is going to unwind itself over time. You do not want this if you want stability in your printer and your prints. So make sure those spring washers are on there on each of those screws. This has basically taken us to the end of this process. And as you see, the whole way through, my spare hand has been placing just a finger with firm support down onto the actual build plate itself as I did up the screws. This is to make sure that everything is nice and firm and tight, and the build plate doesn't for some reason ride up into the air away from the actual printer, which is not what we want. So now we're ready to actually perform a print. So we're going to pour some resin in. This is a UV resin from Creality, supplied with the printer, and as far as I've found, it's actually been quite a good resin. So into the vat it goes. You'll see there's 3 mark lines on there of where you can fill it to. Definitely don't go above the max point. You may think that you're helping yourself out and there's plenty of room still. By the time the volume of the print head moves into that vat, if you have gone over that 650ml max, you will risk overflowing. It will, like a person jumping into a full bath, it will overflow out the sides of the vat, and then you're in for all sorts of issues. You really don't want that. When we come up here now, we want to actually perform a print. So we plug our USB in. Then we're going to go all the way back to our home screen. We want to hit the print button, and then we want to pick our file. So once you pick the file, it'll load up onto the actual printer itself. This is a really great feature that the Halot-one had, and they've carried it through to the Halot-one Plus. What it means is now, once I start printing, this is on the hard drive of the printer. I can actually walk away with the USB that I was just using. That's important because if you want to do other slicing, maybe you're in a rush and you're like, oh crap, I'll get it onto there, get the printer going because I've got a lot of things to print in a short time frame. You're able to walk away and you're able to move on to the next print and get it sliced. So here we are going along. You can see we're quite a ways into it and it's printing out nicely. Here, of course, is the printer in action. So down into the vat, and you can see it's moving very slowly down into the vat and rising out very slowly from the vat when it does its retractions. This is again down to those retraction and motor speeds that we programmed in when we were slicing. We get to the end of the first print. Latex gloves are on because we want to protect ourselves from the harmful resins. These resins are toxic. And we simply unscrew the knob on top that holds in our build plate. And we're able to remove the miniature. I made it look a little bit harder than it was, simply because I didn't finish working with the printer at the time. And there you go. That is a miniature printed, but it's covered in a layer of resin. So we need to go wash and clean this, cure this, and we can actually show that off now. So this is the cured miniature as it came out. Now, unfortunately, I did drop the miniature and snapped a tiny little aerial off the side of the Marine's helmet on the right-hand side, which sucks. But other than that, we're good. Here is our finished Space Marine. Ignore the little bit of flashing that's on the magazine of the bolt pistol. That's just a loose piece of debris. But yes, the actual Marine himself. A little bit shiny, could use a little bit more cleaning, but as you can see, this is tabletop quality comfortably. This hasn't had any cleanup beyond being removed from the sprue, and that one bit I thought would give us grief, that bit on the nacelle, is exactly what gave us grief. Now you can see here the print lines or striations going across the back of the miniature. They're there, they're real, but you will not actually see those lines when you undercoat the miniature, and because of the direction we printed in, that's the only reason you can see them really in the first place. So perfectly acceptable for a first print on this printer. Now we're coming in to grab a Colex Sun Eater himself. So at the very end of this whole printing process, that's where we get to this guy. So this one I want to save until later on because I never like trying out a printer as in go big or go home. Picking the biggest model I can find and putting that on the printer first thing off the bat. Dropped a little resin there, but nothing paper towel can't clean. And as you can see, that is a big model. This model physically could not fit into a smaller size printer like a Halot-one or an Anycubic Photon or an Elegoo Mars. You're not fitting that size miniature in there. So what a big improvement it is going to this printer. And this of course is the finished model. Yes, it's oversaturated, I can't help that, but I need to turn on a strong light in order to cast shadows. That way you can actually see some of this detail up close, and well, there's a lot of detail. Again, like the Marine, this isn't fully cleaned. This is the miniature, simply cleaned enough that I can handle it with my bare hands, but cut away from the supports and sprues. And you can see all the little fine scales on the top of the toenails and little details. And any sort of polygonal shapes you can see in the armor is not down to limitations of the printer. That's because this miniature, I'm pretty sure, was pulled directly from Total War Warhammer 2 and has been modified into a 3D print. So they upscaled that tiny little digital model, which is pretty damn cool. But yeah, overall, excellent quality product. Here, of course, you can actually see him side by side with the Space Marine. So, yeah, it gives you an idea of the size of what you can produce. And that's a big Space Marine, by the way. That is not a short little boy. This boy's only a little bit shorter than the Primaris as printed. So, big boys. So there you have it. Overall, the printer has been fantastic. Now, what are the little nigglies that I wish would be fixed on these printers? I can think of a couple. So, first things first, they've moved the location of the threaded or bolts that hold down the vat. So you can see the bolts are at the corners now diagonally on the vat. They're not going into the midsection in the side. That's likely due to, in my engineering mind, volume. Don't have enough volume inside there for the cover to fit over. If those screws are on the edges, they're going to hit the case. So they move them to the corners. Fine. I have multiple of these resin printers, and they all have this screw system to hold down the vat. On my Creality LD006, I didn't put the screws in once. What do we think happened to the screen? The printhead came down, picked up the entire vat, dropped it on the screen. I wasn't in the area. Didn't realize that I dumped almost a litre of resin over the printer, through the screen, through the vat, through everything. That was a wonderful experience. Really glad that happened. So that was entirely user error, not the printer's fault. But I feel like it would be very easy, because I know it would be, to put a small sensor in to make sure you've got those bolts in that hold it down, because that's one of the easiest way to kill your printer, and it's something you easily overlook. You put the little bolts in, the bolts are retained automatically by the vat itself. But sometimes, it's late at night, you're doing a big print run, you're tired, you're out of it, you're not thinking straight, because you run these things for days on end because they're slow. And all of a sudden, I forgot to put one bolt in, but nothing understood that. You can easily put a proxy sensor in that picks up when the tip of the bolt protrudes through into the lower casing. Wouldn't add too much cost to the unit, could be easily done, and I would love to see that. Another little feature that I would like to see is replacing the 4 Allen key cap head screws that currently are used to actually hold the build plate in place for zeroing and leveling. I'd like to see those replaced with little knob-headed screws so you can do it by hand without having to get an Allen key in there, or if they're going to persist with an Allen key, get one with an actual ball joint on the end of it, not just one that's cheaper but just cut flat at the tip, because those little ball joints make it just easier to get in there. They really do. It's lovely as always that these Creality printers have the little filter at the back. My Elegoo Saturn S has quite a large external filter pod where you can go to Elegoo and they'll give you new pods and yada yada. Yeah, that's a terrible system for a filter. This one here, yeah, it's only small. It's only a little bit of filtery material, foam, like stringy foam type material in there. It's fine, it does the trick, but a larger unit perhaps could be placed into there. Again, nothing against this unit itself, just a general trend in these things I would like to see. Overall though, really happy with the printer. It's performed admirably, spectacularly even, one could say, for its size, and I had big expectations for it. Like I said, my Halot-one has just performed. It's kicked goals for 10 months straight. Constant use. You guys have seen Project Cronenberg. You've seen some of the stuff we've Resin 3D printed on this channel. What a little performer. The question for this one is going to be long term. How does it perform? Because I just don't know yet how it's going to perform over 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, a year. The expectation is there that it's going to perform well, but you simply don't know how well put together something was or what it's going to do in the long term, and that's always my biggest concern. But as it stands right now, I would highly rate this printer. In fact, I would suggest this as probably my go-to printer in this size range as we speak. I know that's a big call, and I'm thinking of units like the Anycubic Photon M3. I'm thinking of the Elegoo Mars 3. Okay, they're cool little units. They're good units too. No one's going to deny that. But having used a lot of Elegoo and Anycubic products over time, Elegoo's leveling system sucks balls. That's it. There's no polite way to say it. That is the term. And it sucks because it's a ball joint. And that ball joint head is way, way less forgiving and way easier to cause grief than this 4-screw system is. I don't know why Elegoo persists with the ball joint head. I hate it. And everyone I spoke to who has printers who have both types of heads loves this type more. Yeah, circumstantial evidence, I know, but take it from me. I'm a fitter and turner by trade, okay? I got a certificate 3 and 4 in mechanical engineering. Ball joint head in this application sucks in my opinion. Professional opinion. Then we've got the fact that, okay, 4K is becoming standard. M3 from Anycubic Photon. The M3 is also 4K. It is also a large print bed, but it is smaller than this one. So straight away, this is superior in that regard as well. And other than that, the two machines are quite similar. Then you've got slicing software. Hate Anycubics. I tolerate Crealities, and I generally use external anyway. But in those first precious few months of these printers being out in the wild, you don't tend to get easy access to the different slicing software profiles. What you'll find is everyone's trying to figure out what settings work best on that printer, because you can't just port over the settings from a previous printer to your new one and expect it to work. You often have to do a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of fiddling, and find what works. So right now, I suggest this printer. It is more expensive. You could pick up 2 Halot-ones for the same price. Start your own little print farm. But if you've got enough space to pick up 2 Halot-ones, buy a Halot Light, buy a Halot Sky. Get something that size if you've got the space for it. I suggest though the Halot-one Plus, because it's only going to take up as much space as a single Halot-one. And even then, nothing wrong with the Halot-one. This is just a little bit more accurate, and it lets you build a lot bigger models. So if that's important to you, hey, it's going to work out better for you in the long run, because you often find when you start 3D printing in bulk, you outgrow your printer. This time out, we have a chance to not outgrow our printer straight away. So that's why it gets my recommendation. Anyway, that's all from me. I'm Mac with the Other Circle. I hope you found this informative or helpful in some way. If you do buy a printer, let them know you bought on my recommendation. That'd be pretty cool. But other than that, if you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Thank you all for watching, and thank Creality for sending me this printer to actually review. I really liked it. I think they've got very few things they can improve on it for the price point and what I expect. See you all next time.